Do you have a moment? It's about your mother-in-law. The doctor, who had pulled on my arm, looked at me with a deeply concerned expression. It's been 10 years since my mother-in-law became wheelchair-bound, and she has regularly been going to the hospital for checkups and physical therapy. That day, my mother-in-law's at the hospital for the same reason, undergoing tests. I was waiting for my mother-in-law in the waiting room before her therapy session when this doctor grabbed my arm. I'm gonna speak with her primary doctor about this. I gently released my arm from the doctor's grip. The doctor standing in front of me was a man, but my mother-in-law's primary was a woman. I didn't heard of any change in her primary care doctor. I was puzzled as to why a doctor who wasn't her primary would want to talk about my mother-in-law. Seeing the suspicion in my eyes, the male doctor hastily grabbed my hands. There's something neither your mother-in-law nor her primary doctor should hear. That's why I only want to tell you. Huh? Only me? I took a step towards the doctor, who was looking at me with a grave expression. My name is Julie. I'm a 37-year-old office worker. I work at a small and medium-sized company, but for some reason, I've been working remotely lately. When I was a child, my mother left home, and I was raised in a single-parent family. My father was always like, your mother was a no-good woman who ran off with a younger man. He advised me to never meet her. All I heard was that her name was Yvonne and she was a spendthrift, treating me like a nuisance and my father like a slave. My parents eventually divorced, and thanks to my father working day and night, I was able to go to college and find a job, albeit not at a big firm. Even though I didn't have a mother, I never felt lonely because of all the love my father gave me. After starting work, I've lived alone and become independent. 14 years ago, I married Mike. Mike's father had passed away 2 years before our wedding, and his mother, who was living alone, warmly welcomed me into their family, treating me like her own daughter. For years into our marriage, my mother-in-law was involved in a car accident and became wheelchair-bound. My mother-in-law used to be a lively and cheerful woman, but since the accident, her smiles have disappeared, and she's become very withdrawn. It must be hard for her to accept limited mobility. Though she had various caregivers over the years, it seemed none of them were a good match, and she seemed to deteriorate. She kept contacting us, saying she felt lonely and wanted us to come back, even if it was for a short while. Concerned, we decided to move back into his family home to take care of her. We decided to take a week off using our paid time off to dedicate to her care, and then return to our jobs once she was feeling better. My mother-in-law seemed relieved when my husband and I came to visit. After a few days, she began to smile again. But when we told her that we needed to get back to work, her demeanor changed completely. She didn't let us go. She was like, no. Please, both of you, don't leave. Don't leave me alone, crying out, nearly hysterical. Trying to calm her, I was like, look. Mike really needs to get back to his job, but I'll talk to my company and see if I can stay here a bit longer. I'll come back as often as I can. Just hang in there for me. Julie, if you can stay, that'd be great. Mike, you better come back, okay? I'll be waiting. After the loss of her husband, my mother-in-law had been alone for a long time. When we, as a couple, came to visit, she was overjoyed. But our sudden notification of leaving her likely brought on feelings of anxiety and confusion. I guessed her weakened state over the past week made her more fearful of facing her loneliness. After discussing with my company, I decided to switch to remote work and work for a short time from home until my mother-in-law calmed down while taking care of her. But ever since then, she despised being alone. Even when I worked from home, she'd always be clinging to me. No matter how close we might be, I couldn't let her be seen by my coworkers. Even if I asked her to leave the room, she'd always be waiting somewhere she could see me. It felt like I was being watched, and I began to resent it. Mike, on the other hand, would come home on weekends and even take some days off during the week to help with her care. Although she continued physical therapy, there was no improvement in her condition, which meant I couldn't return to the office. Our personal lives were dominated by her care, leaving no time for just the two of us. This year marks the 10th year of this lifestyle. She turned 65. With each passing year, her dependency on us grew. My husband, unable to bear it, reduced his visits year by year. Even if I stepped out for just a few minutes, my mother-in-law would freak out, yelling, and she was like, "Take me with you." Calming her down took ages, and I couldn't go back to our own home. But I couldn't abandon the woman who had welcomed me, from a single-parent household, without any judgment or prejudice. Then, one day, everything changed. On this day, my mother-in-law had a routine checkup. As always, I accompanied her to the hospital. My mother-in-law's doctor was a woman in her 30s named Mia. She had been taking care of my mother-in-law for 10 years, and I trusted her completely. After my mother-in-law went into the examination room, I stepped outside to take a work call. When I returned about 15 minutes later, a young male doctor stopped me. "Excuse me, you're Sally's daughter, right?" Sally is my mother-in-law's first name. The doctor who called out using my mother-in-law's name was a male doctor a bit younger than me. It was Ryan, and he recently transferred to this hospital. He mentioned that he's worked in the same department as Dr. Mia, who has been in charge of my mother-in-law. Taken aback, I was like, "Yes, actually I'm her daughter-in-law." "But what's going on?" "Well, I'm sorry for the sudden approach. Do you have a moment? I need to discuss something about your mother-in-law." "Regarding my mother-in-law?" "Sure, what's up?" I figured my mother-in-law's appointment probably wasn't over yet, so I agreed. Then, Dr. Ryan looked a bit relieved and led me to a small private room. It was a consultation room, not too far from the examination rooms. Dr. Ryan motioned for me to sit in a chair on the side, and once I settled in, he took a seat across a small desk, looking directly into my eyes. "You're currently living with Sally at her house to take care of her, right?" "Oh, yes, that's right." I explained that for the past 10 years, I'd been working from my mother-in-law's home while caring for her. I hardly had time to hang out with friends, let alone have some alone time with my husband. Because of my mother-in-law's increased dependency, my husband started avoiding coming home. I lost almost all of my personal time, so I couldn't really discuss the care of my mother-in-law with anyone else. Dr. Ryan nodded, listening intently, which made me spill all the frustrations I'd been feeling. "Oh, I'm so sorry for going on and on like this." He was like, "It's completely all right. Anyway, wow, 10 years. He said that with a gentle smile, and then his face grew thoughtful. Moments later, Dr. Ryan looked at me with a serious expression. He started talking. However, what reached my ears wasn't Dr. Ryan's words, but a scream from my mother-in-law. In a panic, both Dr. Ryan and I rushed to the examination room where my mother-in-law was, and what we saw was unthinkable. I was at a loss for words. Dr. Ryan shook his head, and he was like, "You should leave that house ASAP. Get away from your mother-in-law." His words left me speechless. Suppressing the anger that welled up inside me, I nodded to Dr. Ryan. I didn't go to my mother-in-law but headed straight to the police. Though skeptical they'd listen, they promised to send someone to investigate, so I hurriedly packed up my things from the house. The image of what I'd seen at the hospital kept replaying in my mind. An hour or so later, as I was still packing, I called my husband to explain everything. Throughout, I kept receiving countless calls and messages from my mother-in-law. She must have been worried since I didn't show up even after her treatments. But I continued to ignore her non-stop calls and messages until I mostly finished packing. In the evening, my husband and the police arrived, and that's when I finally answered a call from my mother-in-law.
"Julie, where are you? I've called so many times. Why aren't you picking up?"
As soon as the call connected, my mother-in-law yelled with fury. Normally, I'd apologize immediately, but this time with a firm attitude, I was like, "I'm at home.
"Why did you leave me behind and go home first? How could you do that?"
My mother-in-law continued to rant and rave. Sighing, I was like, "Hey, I realized I don't need to live with you anymore, so I'm going back to the house where my husband is." I told my mother-in-law firmly.
Well, Julie, what on earth are you thinking? How do you expect me to live without you? How am I supposed to get back from the hospital?
You probably know best, right? Why don't you just walk back home? After all, your legs are fine. So, you don't need a wheelchair or care, right? When I continued like that, my mother-in-law let out a short scream. I could picture her being extremely upset.
You know I found out everything you've been hiding.
I then relayed to my mother-in-law what Dr. Ryan had told me and what I had personally witnessed. According to Dr. Ryan, recent tests showed that there were no issues with the muscles or nerves in my mother-in-law's body. That's when he thought it might be all in her head. He thought that maybe my mother-in-law genuinely believed she couldn't walk, and that belief was what was actually preventing her from walking. Apparently, the power of such beliefs can be incredibly strong, and he was considering not only physical therapy for her legs but also psychological care. That's why he thought to include me, as family, in the care plan and had called me over. But, it turned out, even that wasn't necessary. While I was speaking with Dr. Ryan, I heard a woman scream from the examination room.
Was that my mother-in-law?
Dr. Ryan and I exchanged glances and quickly went to check the room. The exam room door had a window, and through it, we saw my mother-in-law making gestures as if swatting away an insect. Indeed, the scream had been my mother-in-law's. But why would there be a bug in the exam room? As it turned out, my mother-in-law had mistaken dust for a bug. We saw her picking up the motionless dust and walking over to the trash can to throw it away. Incredibly, my mother-in-law walked without the need for a wheelchair or cane, moving with light steps. I stared in shock as Dr. Ryan pushed me to the corner of the hallway. Peeking into the examination room, we noticed that my mother-in-law didn't seem to be aware of us. She calmly returned to her wheelchair as if nothing had happened. Just then, Dr. Mia came back into the room and slowly extended her hand to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, seemingly in response, placed a brown envelope in her hand. Dr. Mia discreetly slipped the envelope into her skirt pocket and, acting as if nothing unusual had transpired, pushed my mother-in-law's wheelchair towards the facility for physical therapy.
Julie, are you okay?
I was so stunned by the series of events that I could only stand frozen until Dr. Ryan spoke softly to me. It wasn't that she couldn't walk or even that she believed she couldn't. She was pretending to be immobile. Trembling, I felt Dr. Ryan's hand on my shoulder, shaking his head gently. He advised me to leave my in-laws' house immediately, and I quickly packed to escape from my mother-in-law. Throughout my story, my mother-in-law remained silent. Finally, with a sigh audible over the phone, she began to speak, perhaps realizing she couldn't evade the truth any longer. It's true that I became wheelchair-bound after a car accident. And it's true I was injured seriously enough to need care. But thanks to the treatments, about 5 years after the accident, I could walk with the aid of a cane. My husband and I, listening over the speaker, were stunned. To think she had recovered in just 5 years. What then was the purpose of the 12 years we had spent caring for her? She was like I feared that once you both found out I could walk, you'd leave my side, Julie, Mike. I couldn't bear that thought. We knew she loved us dearly from her day-to-day attitude. She had us take care of her to ensure we wouldn't leave. Julie, I truly love you like my own daughter. After Mike moved out and my husband passed away, I felt so lonely. My mother-in-law repeatedly told us, but our hearts remained unmoved. We knew that, Mom. Mike. But the way you went about it was wrong. We can't be by your side any longer. Sorry.
Look, I've been taking care of you for the past 10 years while working. My colleagues have experienced promotions, marriages, and childbirth. Because of your care, I couldn't have a child of my own. I had almost given up on having kids. But now, I feel like the past 10 years are in vain. Why did you deceive us to the point of having us care for you? We would have visited you during our time off. Why did it have to be this way?
I didn't mean to blame her, but as the words poured out, so did my tears. With my husband supporting me, I told my mother-in-law that I didn't intend to care for her anymore. We would leave her house today and never contact her again. My mother-in-law protested and grew hysterical, but we hung up. The police, after understanding the details, said they'd begin an investigation. 2 months later. After moving, I was at a hospital with my husband. When we were about to leave after finishing our doctor's appointment, a familiar person rushed over to us. It was Dr. Mia, who was supposed to be my mother-in-law's doctor. We remembered her with fuller cheeks, but she looked gaunt, and fatigue emanated from her entire being. Wondering why she was at this hospital, we couldn't decline her as she approached with a desperate look, so we reluctantly listened to what she had to say. Turns out, Dr. Mia knew all along that my mother-in-law's leg was healed, and she had accepted money from her to give her a disability diagnosis. She mentioned the money was also in the envelope she received from my mother-in-law that day. Apparently, due to a complaint by Dr. Ryan recently, the hospital found out, and she was fired immediately. Furthermore, since she had continuously forged medical certificates, she's likely going to be arrested for fabricating medical records, and it's almost certain that her medical license will be revoked. But she insisted that she didn't do anything wrong. Incredibly, Dr. Mia claimed that the money wasn't an appreciation gift from my mother-in-law, but hush money from my husband and me. She alleged we plotted to scam disability pension by making my mother-in-law disabled, and she had written the necessary documents reluctantly after we threatened her and paid her off, but there was no evidence of any of this. It was Dr. Mia who extended her hand to my mother-in-law that day. I couldn't believe that she put all the blame on us just because she was in trouble, about to be arrested.
What are you talking about? We haven't done anything like that. No. That's the truth. I'm gonna tell the police everything.
Dr. Mia, her eyes red with rage, shouted, making us turn pale. While her claims had no evidence, it would also be tough for us to prove we had nothing to do with her. Terrified at the thought of being demanded to prove our innocence, a devil's proof, my husband and I were on the verge of tears when a woman approached us. She stood between Dr. Mia and us, shielding us. Aren't you the head doctor here? I urgently need to talk to you. Upon seeing the woman, Dr. Mia turned deathly pale. She quickly put on a forced smile, approached buttering up the woman, who was glaring at her. Do you need something from my daughter? Daughter? The woman, glaring at Dr. Mia, was the head doctor of this hospital, and she was Yvonne, my mother. Yes, my mother, whom I was separated from as a child due to her divorce, was a doctor. After divorcing my father, she quickly rose through the ranks and has been the head of a major university hospital. She was also one of the people who agreed with revoking Dr. Mia's medical license when she found out about her misdeeds.
Oh, you're related. In that case, could you please just hear me out? I was only threatened by them and wrote the diagnosis reluctantly. As a mother, you wouldn't want your daughter to be a criminal, right? Can't you help me out?
Dr. Mia begged, trying to invoke my mother's sympathy right then and there, but my mother shook her head. My mother was like, don't mess with me. You and Sally have been deceiving the hospital and the authorities for 10 years, keeping my daughters confined at home. Sally kept them at home because she was afraid to be alone. You, on the other hand, funded your debts from your nightlife with Sally's disability benefits. You frauds. You need to face appropriate punishment and make amends. Dr. Mia's plea was abruptly dismissed.
No way, absolutely not.
Dr. Mia, realizing there was nothing she could do, slumped to the ground in despair. Whispers and stares from those around us focused on her, and we couldn't help but watch with indescribable feelings. Suddenly, a strong pull came from behind. I was startled and turned around to find, astonishingly, my mother-in-law standing firmly beside my father.
You! What have you done to Julie?
My father, shouting angrily at my mother.
Dad, why are you here? And why with my mother-in-law?
When I heard that Sally was looking for Julie, I wanted to help. You moved to a place without telling me. I thought I would meet you if I followed Dr. Mia. The reason I hadn't told my father our whereabouts was not just because of the family connection between my mother-in-law and him. Ever since my mother-in-law had a car accident, I had asked my father to look after her when I was out for work. It was during those times that they became close and started dating secretly, behind the backs of both of us. I had found out about this last year when I happened to see my father and my mother-in-law talking closely at my in-laws' house on a few occasions after returning from an outing. I suspected their relationship and hence didn't inform my father when we moved. The very sight of them together now sent shivers down my spine.
Give Julie back. I won't let you take her away. Julie, Mike, let's go home.
My father, yelling at my mother, had an intensity I'd never seen before.
Brushing off my father's grip, I was like, stop it. I know all the stories you told me about Mom are lies.
My father's face went pale at my shout. Turned out, since the divorce, he had been feeding me lies about my mother to make sure I didn't want to meet her. The stories about her treating him like a slave or leaving him for a younger man were all false. My mother, an accomplished doctor, always had a busy schedule. My father knew this when they married. But after I started daycare, his attitude shifted drastically. He blamed her for our lack of family vacations and decided to divorce her, claiming she wasn't a good mother. And my father suddenly took me and left home on my 4th birthday. In reality, it was my father who left, not my mother. Following the divorce settlement, even though my mother had a decent income, she couldn't guarantee time for raising me. So, my father was nominated to live with me. However, my mother had been sending a substantial amount in child support every month. I didn't know until I met my mother. Even after becoming a single parent, my father made sure I didn't want to see my mother by portraying her in a negative light with false stories. It seemed that my mother wanted to see me, but most of time she was overseas for trainings or researches. Even she kept sending me letters to me from overseas, but my father kept refusing, hiding the letters. There were times when it seemed they might meet, but something always came up. Either my mother got an emergency call at the hospital or my father would come up with an excuse to cancel at the last minute. I had been told since I was young that my mother couldn't be reached, or that no one knew where she was. Turned out, that was a lie. The reason my father could afford to travel once every 2 months and pay for my high school and college tuition was thanks to the child support money from my mother. Our comfortable life was all thanks to my mother. So, the story of my father working late nights was also a sham. To make it seem like he was struggling with parenting, he'd work a regular 9-to-5 job, then spend night in somewhere, coming home only in early morning. When my father yelled and he was like, "Where's your proof?" my mother calmly showed him a mobile bank app. She was like, "This is how much I've transferred to you over the years for Julie, and your company unusually has strict policies against second jobs, so it was impossible. I can confirm with them if you'd like." My father crumbled, and my mother-in-law tried to comfort him. Seeing my father like this made me realize that I had been lied to my entire life. While the truth was shocking, I felt more anger than anything else. I was like, "Thanks for everything, Dad. But it's time to say goodbye," saying that coldly. My father clung to me, and my mother-in-law was like, "Julie, your dad did everything he thought was best for you." No, he did it for himself. He lied about struggling as a single parent using the money from my mom. And you lied to my husband and me, trying to bind us to your home. Both of you are a perfect match for your lies. Please, stay away from us and my mother. With no excuses left, my father and my mother-in-law were speechless. Ignoring their stunned faces, we left the hospital with my mother. Later, Dr. Mia was arrested and lost her medical license. She had forged medical documents multiple times and was sentenced to imprisonment. Additionally, the hospital she worked for is suing her for defamation. My mother-in-law had bribed a doctor for a fake diagnosis, leading to her having to pay back all the pension money she received with interest. She's also facing fraud charges, as informed by the police. Mike says he's cut ties with her, so he's not bothered about her future. I'm trying not to care either. As for me, I realized I had been somewhat dependent on my mother-in-law. Feeling betrayed sent me into a mental spiral, so I've been seeing a therapist at the hospital where my mother works. Regarding my reunion with my mother, when I was getting a referral at my previous hospital, the doctor's name I was referred to was the same as my mother's. To my surprise, it was actually her. My mother was skeptical when she saw a patient named me, but during the consultation, she realized it was me. Our reunion can only be described as miraculous. I can't be treated by my mother due to hospital rules, but she supports me from behind the scenes. I've been back to my job at the office while still attending therapy. When visiting Dr. Ryan, who informed me of the truth about my mother-in-law, I heard that he and my husband were old high school buddies. We now often hang out, with Ryan visiting our place, and everything feels like old times. It may be hard for me to forget how I was tied up by my mother-in-law and my father. But my husband, my mother, and Dr. Ryan always encourage me to take things easy and do what I want. Thanks to that, I'm planning trips with my friends or going to cafes by myself.
Daddy always buys me candies.
I couldn't believe my kind husband, who cares so much for our daughter, would do something like this. At this point, I was still unaware of the true meaning behind his overtime work. My name is Natalie Thompson. I am 36 years old. My husband, Ken, and I have been married for 6 years and we have a 4-year-old daughter. I am a mother, but also a surgeon. I have been busy with my work since we got married. Ken, aware of my busy schedule, said, "Let's work through this together." And so, we got married. Later on, we were able to have a child. I went back to work shortly after our daughter was born. I wanted to watch our daughter grow a little more, but my job was so demanding that I couldn't take much time off. Despite my busy days, I don't think I've neglected my daughter, and I believe I've given her plenty of love. I think Ken is very supportive when it comes to parenting. He makes time to play with our daughter, and even when I'm not around, he can almost perfectly handle bathing her and getting her dressed. Our 4-year-old daughter loves her dad. Ken has his own job and it must be tough for him, but since our daughter was born, he has been very considerate of my busy work schedule. I have some late nights at work. Even when I'm home, I often have to work. Still, Ken always tells me, "Don't overdo it. I'll take care of our daughter." I took comfort in Ken's words. But I didn't know yet. I couldn't believe that my kind husband was doing something like this. Our daughter attends daycare, and I usually drop her off in the morning, while Ken, who has a more flexible schedule, picks her up. Since she has been going to daycare since she was a baby, she has many friends. She even says she wants to go to daycare on her days off, she enjoys it that much. What I looked forward to the most each day was hearing stories about my daughter's day at daycare after I got home from work. She would tell me stories about playing with her friends at daycare, like building sandcastles or racing to the park. And she would always talk about her time with Ken as well.
"Today, Daddy and I went shopping for dinner."
She always seemed so happy when she talked about it, which made me feel warm inside. I couldn't be more thankful to Ken, who was doing such a great job with our daughter. I had never heard Ken mention having to work overtime before. His company, being relatively large, seemed to encourage employees to leave work on time. So, Ken rarely came home late. But one day, he texted me saying he had to work late and asked if I could pick up our daughter. Fortunately, I was able to arrange my schedule that day and picked her up instead of Ken. Until then, Ken had always been the one to pick her up because of his flexible schedule, so I hadn't heard him mention overtime work before. I thought maybe he had been managing to adjust his schedule all this time, even when it was difficult. At the time, I didn't think much of it. When Ken came home, I asked him, "Have you been adjusting your schedule to pick up our daughter even when you're busy?" After a brief pause, he replied, "It's been a bit busier lately." Ken has a managerial position, so he has a lot of responsibilities. I told him, "If I can arrange my schedule, I'll pick her up, so let me know if you're having a tough time." My husband just said thank you and played with our daughter. After telling him this, he gradually started asking me to pick up our daughter more frequently. I thought it was unavoidable due to work, so I explained the situation to my workplace, arranged time to pick up my daughter, and asked my mother at home to help until I finished work. This went on for 2 months. Eventually, I couldn't take time off every time, so I asked my husband if there was any other way. He then said,
I have a position too, I can't keep saying that. Taking care of the child is a mother's job, right?
I was surprised because he had never said anything like that before. I wondered what had suddenly happened. I thought he might have become harsh due to stress and busyness. However, this incident changed my husband's attitude towards me. Until now, he used to help with household chores and child rearing when I was busy with work, but he stopped doing anything at all. He became busier and couldn't manage everything. I thought I should do whatever I could. However, there were times when I couldn't handle all the housework. Even when I asked for help, he recently started saying,
It's because you prioritize your work.
I understood that. But the fact is, I can't neglect my work when I have patients. He should understand that since he married me, so why suddenly say such a thing? I had one guess. It was that my husband had often tried to talk to me at night. I had been saying I was busy with work or had work left. Admittedly, my husband hasn't been a priority lately. I'm busy, and since our daughter was born, I haven't felt that way. If I have time for my husband, I'd rather rest, to be honest. I hadn't realized that this was the reason I was coming home late. Lately, my husband often said he would be late because he was busy at work. I thought it was unusual after so many years, but I couldn't say anything because I had relied on him too much. However, we have a daughter, so we have no choice but to cooperate. I told my husband that I didn't need him to pick up our daughter every time, but I wanted him to make time somehow. After thinking for a while, he reluctantly agreed. Since then, I haven't heard him say he's working overtime as much. He's been picking up our daughter properly. I felt bad for putting all the burden on my husband, so I told him to adjust within his limits. He just said he understood. However, his attitude towards me remained the same. I wondered why my husband's attitude had changed, but it didn't take long to find out. One day, I was able to finish work earlier than usual. That day, there was no message from my husband saying he would be late due to overtime, so I was a little excited to spend time with my family. My husband usually buys ready-made meals or quickly prepares food. I always rely on my husband, so I decided to cook homemade food after a long time. I wanted to make a lot of their favorite dishes. I was desperately thinking about the menu on my way home. It was time for my daughter and husband to come home, so I finished shopping for dinner and hurried home. Today, I can get home early and listen to my daughter's stories slowly. My daughter, who always wants to help, will probably want to cook together. I was excited. After my daughter went to bed, I thought about having a drink with my husband. I opened the front door with such thoughts. I checked if my daughter and husband had come home. But I felt something was wrong. For some reason, the shoes were arranged differently than usual. I thought my daughter had lined up the shoes I had forgotten to put away. I cautiously looked at the shoes in the entrance again and saw my daughter's and husband's familiar shoes. So far, everything was normal. But there was also a pair of shoes with a design that young girls would like. Why are these shoes at our house? Before I could understand what was happening, I hurried into the house and went to the living room. When I quietly opened the living room door, my daughter was eating snacks and watching TV alone.
Welcome back, Mom. You're early today.
What's going on? My daughter was watching TV alone as if it were a regular thing. I asked my daughter without understanding the situation. I'm home. I saw Daddy's shoes, but where is Daddy?
Daddy is working with someone from his office in the room upstairs, so wait by watching TV.
Hearing that, I got goosebumps. From the shoes at the entrance and my daughter's words, I could somehow sense what was happening. No, but it's impossible. Would my husband, who cares about our daughter, do such a thing? I went upstairs, trying not to think too much and holding my breath. And then, I confirmed that there was some noise coming from a room. I hesitated for a moment, but then I forcefully opened the door of that room. My head went blank, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. There, I saw a sight I didn't even want to imagine, my husband and another woman. Hey! Natalie, what are you doing here?
It's not what are you doing here, is it? What are you doing in our bedroom? Who is that woman? And what do you mean by leaving our daughter alone in the living room?
I couldn't stop talking.
Just get dressed quickly and explain.
My hand trembling with anger as I closed the door. Leaving our 4-year-old daughter alone in the living room, what was this man thinking? Moreover, bringing a woman into our house and into the bed where our whole family sleeps. After a while, when I opened the door, the two were sitting side by side, dressed.
What does this mean?
I asked, pretending to be calm.
Well, this is...
At first, my husband, Ken, tried to make an excuse, but then the woman beside him whispered, "Is that your wife?" And he suddenly said to me,
"It's because you're always working and never paying attention to me. This is your own fault."
That's right. Poor Ken. Well, it seems like he doesn't see you as a woman anymore, old lady.
That's right. Now that you understand, get out quickly.
What is he talking about? While thinking that in the back of my mind, I was already running down the stairs before he finished talking. I wanted to retort more, but I was not in the mood due to anger and sadness. I just wanted to get away from there as quickly as possible. Then, while eating snacks and sitting cutely watching TV, I told my daughter, "Let's go out." My daughter asked without hesitation,
"Where's Daddy?"
"Daddy is busy with work." It was hard to explain to my daughter, and I held back my tears of anger and headed for my parents' house. In the car, I asked my daughter, "Has Daddy ever said he was working with a woman at home after picking you up from daycare?"
"Yes. He said it was important work, so I had to watch TV quietly. And, don't tell Mommy. If you can keep it a secret, you can eat snacks. Amy and Daddy always bought me lots of snacks. I'm sorry, Mommy."
My daughter called the woman Amy. "Do you know the name of the lady?" My daughter was a quick learner. She remembered the woman's name and told me. I felt guilty and angry at my daughter's innocent words, and the tears I had been holding back came out. My husband, who had bribed a small child with snacks to keep quiet and brought a woman into our home several times while leaving her alone in the room, was unforgivable. And I started thinking about how to get back at those two. And decided to consult someone. When I have a problem, there is always one person I consult first. It was my boss at work. This boss introduced us and knows my husband's company well. He has been a trustworthy person who has listened to my problems sincerely since I started working. I told my boss about what happened and the woman's name. My boss listened seriously but didn't say much, just listened to my story. And then he went back to work. A week later, I was called by my boss. I thought it was about the consultation. My boss had secretly investigated. It turned out that the woman my husband was having an affair with was a student working part-time at my husband's company. I became very sad when a student stole my husband, but the thought of my husband being smitten with that student gave me goosebumps. I was introduced to someone by my boss, whom I had consulted. It turned out to be the hospital director, whom I also knew. I was wondering why the director was introduced to me, when my boss said, "Actually, I was consulted by the director as well. It seems that his daughter is not going to school much, and he's wondering what to do. It's surprising that she is not only skipping school but also having an affair." My boss seemed to be surprised as well. It turned out that the daughter, whom the director had consulted about, was the woman with whom my husband was having an affair. I thought the world was a small place. According to my boss, the woman my husband was having an affair with is a medical student aiming to become a doctor. I wondered why she was working part-time at my husband's company, which is not related to medicine. However, it didn't take long to find out. I decided to lay in wait near my husband's office. I was surprised that I was trying to meet the woman my husband was having an affair with, but I had no intention of backing down. Then, the woman appeared. When she noticed me, she said,
"Eh? What? A middle-aged woman laying in wait?
Scary. She can say whatever she wants."
"Today, you are not with my husband, are you?"
The woman laughed snidely and said with a composed expression,
"I'm not with him every day. But sorry for stealing your high-income husband, old lady."
While thinking that I earn more than my husband, I continued, "I heard you are a medical student. Why are you working part-time at my husband's company, which has nothing to do with being a doctor?" The woman, looking shocked, glared at me as if to say,
"You've researched that much?" Ken kept saying he wanted me near him. He was persistent, but Ken buys me anything. It's nice to have a high-income boyfriend.
The woman seemed to consider my husband as nothing more than a cash cow. I felt a bit sorry for my husband, who didn't know he was thought of in that way, but that didn't matter anymore.
If you are aiming to be a doctor, shouldn't you be going to school and studying properly? Why do I have to be told what to do by an old lady like you? Can you stop picking on me just because your husband was stolen?
It's my business, isn't it? When I told her that her father was worried about her, the woman's face started to turn pale.
"Why are you bringing up my father? Don't say careless things without knowing anything."
I made a call to someone on the spot. And within a minute, the director appeared. As soon as the director saw me, he apologized, saying, "I am truly sorry for my daughter." The woman, who didn't understand why her father was there, was flustered.
"I heard everything. What are you doing, not going to school and playing with someone else's husband? What's fun about that?"
The woman's father, the director, seemed to be a very strict person, and she seemed unable to talk back.
"Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know he was married."
She was desperately trying to make excuses even at this point, but the director had heard the entire conversation between us. "Whether he was married or not, what you are doing is pathetic, and there was no excuse that would work." Afterwards, the woman, who couldn't say anything to her father, was taken home by the director. I had planned this day with the director immediately after my boss introduced us. When I told the director about my husband, he held his head in his hands, saying, "I can't believe my daughter is doing such a pathetic thing." And then he said,
"I will scold my daughter properly, so please demand compensation or anything you need."
I once thought that it would be unreasonable to demand compensation from a student, but considering the director's feelings, I decided to demand it properly. I returned home after a month. It seems that my husband is feeling down, maybe because he lost contact with the woman he was having an affair with. During this month, he did not apologize to me at all, only contacted me about our daughter. He probably thought I would come back eventually and waited carelessly. I have been preparing for divorce this past month. I am also considering taking a significant amount of money from both of them. Of course, I will make my husband pay child support. I placed the business card of my divorce lawyer and a settlement document regarding child support and property division in front of my husband. I remember reading somewhere that it's good to prepare a settlement document to make sure you get paid properly. It said that if you do not get paid, you can take legal action. I have lost trust in my husband due to this incident, and I thought of getting revenge by being thorough. I consulted with my lawyer multiple times and created the settlement document. When my husband saw the business card and settlement document, he quickly said, "I don't want a divorce." He insisted he only met the woman once, but I told him our daughter said she had been coming and going from our house multiple times and had even bribed her with candy. Do you believe what a 4-year-old child says more than me? That's impossible.
"I trust Mindy more than you. I won't forgive you for belittling Mindy just because she's a child."
It seemed my husband was angry that I believed our daughter more than him. No matter what I said, he insisted it was only once, so I presented a recording I secretly made when he met the woman. "You met Amy behind my back and even recorded it? I didn't know you had the courage to do such a thing." He seemed to be belittling me. And he was confident that the woman wouldn't say anything bad about him. However, when he heard the woman referring to him as a cash cow, he was shocked. He was in love with her. Unable to make excuses, my husband bowed his head in silence. I said firmly,
"I don't want to waste any more time on you, so sign the settlement document quickly."
Reluctantly, he signed the document. Later, I visited my boss who had advised me and reported the situation, expressing my gratitude. My boss told me that when I mentioned the woman's name, he recognized it and immediately understood the situation. Thanks to my boss, I was able to get a divorce. Afterward, the divorce was finalized. I demanded money from both my husband and the woman he had an affair with. I got custody of our daughter. My husband, who loves our daughter despite what he did, begged me to let him see her until the end. But I firmly refused, not wanting my daughter to see a man who had a relationship with another woman while leaving her behind. My husband was disheartened, but he couldn't afford to be down because he had to work hard to pay child support. It seems that the woman was scolded severely by her father after that. Her father found out she was neglecting school and getting involved with men and told her,
"Can someone like you handle a job where you are responsible for people's lives? If you are serious, retake the entrance exam."
He also told her to drop out and repay the tuition. It seems the woman is working hard to earn money to pay back her father for the tuition and my consolation money. As for me, I am still busy, but I make sure to spend quality time with my daughter, and I feel fulfilled. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay, or how are you feeling?"
"Divorcing a wife who doesn't work. Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. Sounds good. Take care."
John chuckled as he said this. Standing beside him, Emily was wrapping her arm around his, wearing a similar smug expression. "Fine, let's divorce then." I said it so casually that John seemed a bit surprised, but he quickly shared a smile with Emily. Good thing John isn't much of a thinker. It makes my plan easier to execute. After the divorce papers got approved, I decided to start my revenge plan on both of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a 47-year-old illustrator. I also work as a children's book author. I just love drawing. I have two childhood friends, John and Emily. They're important friends to me, and John is also my husband. It all started when John asked me out as I was heading to a different college after high school. I was surprised. I'd thought he was into Emily. But I couldn't say no to a confession from John, whom I had secretly liked. After some thought and consultation with Emily, I accepted John's proposal. Emily's behavior had been a bit problematic since her teens, but she was still a dear friend to both John and me. However, Emily had a tendency to snatch other people's boyfriends and then dump them once they became obsessed with her, causing problems time and again. Her parents were concerned, so John and I often spent time with her to watch over her. John and I got married when we were 25. 4 years later, Emily brought her fiancé into our lives. His name was George, a professional working for a top-tier company. Nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you. Looking forward to our future together. George was very polite and we all got along immediately. We would get together during holidays and vacations, taking trips or going on long train rides to enjoy some drinks. However, things started falling apart. After Emily got pregnant 2 years into her marriage. John and I originally had many siblings, so there was no worry about an heir, so we decided we didn't need children. Both of us loved kids, but weren't keen on actively caring for them. Besides, we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks. We often found it heartwarming to see families with children, but it was never more or less than that. When Emily announced her pregnancy, John's attitudes started to change. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell, and even offered to drive her to doctor's appointments using his vacation days. I warned him. George might get upset if you're always with Emily. But John argued back. You have work, don't you? She's our childhood friend and she's reaching out for help. You're heartless. I said. I've been buying things and helping where I can, but going with her to the obstetrician is crossing the line. When I said that, John frowned. And then, he glared at me.
Why? Because Emily wants it, right? She says she's anxious about the checkup. I can't just let her go alone.
If she's anxious, all the more reason for George to go with her, right? If you go with her every time, it's almost like you're the father of the baby in her belly, John.
Jealous? You're not gonna get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem?
He didn't take my concerns seriously, and instead started to snap, saying I was being annoying. We'd hardly ever had a fight during our marriage, but things changed when Emily got pregnant. Our arguments increased. And that didn't change even after Emily gave birth. In fact, John started spending even more time with Emily and their child, Emma. But when Emma was 6, an incident occurred. It had to do with the attendees of Emma's graduation ceremonies. The day before the graduation, John suddenly started rummaging through the closet. John, what are you doing? Have a meeting tomorrow? John's workplace had a casual dress code, but there was a rule to wear a suit during client meetings. So, he always kept a few suits ready, but they were all thrown on the bed now. No. Just trying to decide what to wear for the graduation ceremony.
What? You're seriously thinking of attending the graduation?
Yeah, George can't make it, Emily asked me.
Wait. That's absurd, no matter how you look at it.
I inadvertently raised my voice in denial. Immediately, John's face turned sour. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so myself when asked. Yet, it was nonsensical for a childhood friend, who wasn't even a biological parent, to attend a graduation ceremony.
What, you still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even help out. That's not the point. Anyway, I'm attending the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt properly.
John said that and abruptly ended the conversation, leaving me behind and going to the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily. Hello, Emily? About tomorrow.
Sorry about tomorrow. I'm borrowing John.
But, won't George be upset about the graduation attendance?
Sarah, what are you talking about? Obviously, I haven't told George that the graduation is tomorrow. I'll tell him after the ceremony.
I was shocked to learn that George didn't know about the graduation schedule. Upon further questioning, it seemed that Emily hadn't informed George about any of the kindergarten events so far, and John had been acting as the father at the kindergarten, which made me dizzy with its selfishness. Wait a minute, Emily, isn't that extremely unreasonable? It's disrespectful to George, and just because he's a childhood friend.
What's wrong, Sarah, you're scary. Well, see you tomorrow.
Wait, Emily. I was trembling with anger at Emily, who unilaterally hung up the phone. Still, in the end, I ironed a shirt, prepared a tie, and the next morning, saw John off to Emma's graduation ceremony. Since then, Emily and John started going out more frequently, from once a month to once a week, and then to 3 times a week. Eventually, even George seemed to have some suspicions, and one day, while John and Emily were out, he visited our house alone. I'm sorry for visiting you late at night. There's something that's been bothering me. Is it about the 2 of them? Yes, I would like you to take a look at this. George showed me the GPS history he had installed in Emily's car. It showed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week. All of those days, she was out with John, and just by looking at George's face, I understood what that meant. What do you want to do, George? I want to take revenge on those 2. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. We started planning our revenge on them secretly. First, I started by increasing my income. Because I had been saving by doing housework and taking care of Emma, my income had drastically decreased. George switched to working from home. And when Emily and John would go out, he would bring Emma to my house, and we would take care of her together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we knew about their relationship, and we were able to gather solid evidence. Once we had collected enough evidence and were ready to take our revenge, we discovered a shocking truth about Emma. George and I struggled with the decision, but we both agreed that we didn't want to hurt young Emma, so we decided to wait until she was an adult to take our revenge. However, even though we decided to endure for 10 years, I was struck with a serious illness. I needed long-term hospitalization, and even at best, I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. Although I could work from the hospital room, it was certain that I would have to reduce my workload. After informing George about the situation, I consulted John. However, John's reaction was no different from when we were making small talk. I'll visit you once in a while. I felt that John no longer had any affection for me, as he didn't even ask about my condition or the name of the disease. In reality, John only visited once a month or once every 2 months. And after Emma's 15th birthday, she started acting strangely. Although she used to visit me almost every day right after I was hospitalized, she became distant after her 15th birthday. However, neither George nor I could figure out why, and we were puzzled. Even when we asked Emma, she just said, "Don't worry about it." However, we ended up learning the reason from John, who rarely showed up. "Hey, it's been a while." "Yeah, it has." John, who had completely transformed into a flashy appearance, walked in without even knocking. After not seeing him for a month, John just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking, "Are you okay, or how are you feeling?" "Divorcing a wife who doesn't work. Pay me $1,000 a month as alimony. That's the deal. So, take care," John said, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him, Emily wrapped her arms around John's with a similar expression on her face. "Fine, let's divorce then." I casually agreed, which seemed to surprise John for a moment, but he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. It was good that John wasn't the type to think too deeply. That's why my plan worked so well. After receiving a notification that the divorce was finalized from John, I decided to start my revenge plan against the two of them. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. I promptly started to take action. First, I contacted George to transfer hospitals. Then, I informed my lawyer that they would be mediating between the two parties from now on. George also began to act at the same time. He moved near my new hospital with Emma. And he started to visit me frequently. Emma still had a gloomy expression, but I was happy that she came to see me every day. Most of my belongings were already in the hospital room, so I told John to dispose of the rest. I didn't want to bring anything that the two of them might have touched into my new life. Once the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move settled down, I received a call from John. I had only left my seat for a few minutes, but my smartphone already showed 30 missed calls. I answered the phone, feeling exasperated. "What?"
"Hey, what the hell is going on?"
I could hear the voice of a troubled real estate agent behind John's panicked voice. I also heard Emily yelling, which made me feel sick. "What do you mean, what's going on?"
"It's obviously about the house. Why do we have to move out?"
John shouted at me as if it wasn't his fault at all. I replied to him coolly. "Obviously, because that's my house."
"Huh?"
John seemed to have completely forgotten, but the truth was, the house we lived in was a room I rented as a workspace when I started to make a living as a freelancer. At that time, I didn't have enough income to maintain 2 houses, and John didn't have enough income to live alone. So, he ended up moving into my place. Therefore, John had never paid the rent or utility bills for that room. Although I received some money from him for living expenses, it wasn't enough to maintain the place. Unfortunately, that room was already cancelled. It was far from the hospital I transferred to, so I had processed the cancellation the day after submitting the divorce papers. I didn't inform him because the real estate agent, who knew the situation, said they would contact him.
"George and Emma suddenly disappeared, and our house was sold. What are we gonna do about our new house?"
I don't know. Maybe stay in a business hotel for now? As I turned on the speaker and started working, John yelled in frustration.
Don't screw with me.
However, he seemed to remember something and started speaking in a more soothing tone.
Well, whatever. When will you transfer the money? We're running low on cash.
What are you talking about?
Huh? Don't mess around. I told you to pay $1,000, didn't I?
Oh, I don't recall agreeing to that. My nonchalant response was met with incoherent screaming from John on the other end of the phone. Apparently, he thought he could get money from me and had been squandering it. Even if he had $1,000 left, how did he plan to get by for the rest of the month?
Hey! Don't just stay silent, say something.
There's really nothing to talk about. My retort left John momentarily dumbfounded, but he soon started yelling again. Growing increasingly annoyed, I addressed John in as cheerful a tone as I could muster. Anyway, we're basically strangers now, so please don't contact me anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer.
Huh? Lawyer? Hey, wait a minute.
I hung up without listening to John's response. He tried calling back several times, but I ignored it, and eventually, the calls stopped. However, angry that I didn't answer, John started ignoring calls from my lawyer. He certainly had a childish side, but I never imagined he'd be the kind of person who didn't mind causing trouble for others. I sighed deeply at John's selfishness. A few months later, after a temporary discharge from the hospital, I visited John's parents' house. In front of me were John and Emily, both looking small and trembling.
You telling my parents is a low blow.
Oh, I just reported that we got divorced. John glared at me in response to my answer, but he shrank back under his father's stern gaze. Actually, I had a great relationship with my in-laws, even visiting and dining with them when John wasn't around. Despite being so well loved, I felt it was wrong not to share the details of our divorce, so I went to visit them.
Is it true that you're remarrying Emily?
Yes, it's true. Emily, Emma, and I are going to start over as a family.
What are you talking about? Your only family is Sarah. She's not my family anymore.
John's words made his father frown. With a look that seemed to say, "Give me a break," John shook his head a few times, then handed me a piece of paper. It was a bill from a nearby luxury hotel. What's this? It's the bill from the hotel we stayed at. John, acting as if it was obvious, pointed at the bill on the table, then suddenly collapsed.
Ow, what the heck, Mom? I didn't raise you to be like this.
My mother-in-law, gasping for breath, was met with a look of disbelief from John. Next to him, Emily wore the same expression.
Why are you so angry? It's just that the family is changing because I'm getting married. Plus, you'll have a grandchild. A blood-related one at that. Aren't you happy? You two didn't.
My mother-in-law, looking as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, glanced at Emily, then turned her gaze to me. Both my in-laws understood that I didn't want children and still treated me as their own daughter. Of course, they treated Emily, my childhood friend, similarly, but there was always a boundary between a daughter-in-law and a friend. I remembered Emily often complaining about that. So, I was certain my mother-in-law wouldn't be happy about this situation, and Emily should have known it too.
You doted on Emma, right? It'll be your grandchild, so you'll be happy, right?
It's because she's a child I've known since she was little.
Oh, but half of her blood is from John, right?
Even after all this, Emily, showing no sign of remorse and acting as if she couldn't understand the problem, gave me goosebumps. At that moment, someone who had been silent until now spoke up.
Enough already. It's disgusting.
Huh? Emma? Emma, who had been playing with her smartphone in the corner of the room, spoke to Emily without looking up. The room fell into a stunned silence.
My dad is the only one I consider my father. Whether we're related by blood or not, he's the only one. But, you know, John has always been the one to attend your school events. I heard everything from Dad. How he was always informed of the event dates after they were over. how eventually, even the events themselves were kept from him. But Dad always said I was his daughter. So, I am his daughter, and I will never be yours.
Emma glared at Emily as she said this. Then, sitting beside me, she switched to a more concerned tone.
You know, when I found out about this, I thought you would hate me. But Dad said that wasn't the case, so I came here today.
Emma, I love you so much. You were so kind to visit me every day while I was in the hospital. I was really happy.
Sarah!
Emma, perhaps relieved of her anxiety, teared up and hugged me tightly. It might indeed be a child resulting from an affair between John and Emily. Yet, it's a child I've taken care of for 15 years, there's no way I don't have affection for her. Speaking of which, Emily, weren't you curious why I wasn't surprised when I found out Emma is John's daughter?
Ah.
Emily looked startled. Before she could speak, a new person entered the room. We knew from the start. 10 years ago, actually.
George!
Emily started to panic when George suddenly appeared. Understandably so, as she had recently unilaterally demanded a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I was shocked when you mentioned divorce. Oh, and unfortunately, you're not divorced yet. The divorce papers are still here. Didn't you notice?
What?
I figured it wasn't in Emily and John's nature to confirm things, but I couldn't help but be stunned that Emily, despite the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry, hadn't noticed for months. So, Emily is still my wife, and Emma is still my daughter. Well, soon there won't be a wife, though.
Wait, what do you mean?
A 15-year-old can choose their parent.
That's not true. Emma wants to be with Mom, right?
Emily said that and looked at Emma. Emma frowned at Emily and held my hand. Emily was speechless at that and glared at me. Then, John suddenly burst into laughter.
So that's what it is. You two are together, huh? But too bad, isn't it impossible to live on George's salary alone? Can you stop making weird assumptions? Also, it seems George earns double the amount you think Emily knows about. Huh? It's probably a bluff, lol. Besides, it's impossible for you to work while dealing with your illness. You'll just die miserably somewhere.
This time I laughed at John's huge misunderstanding. John, seeing me suddenly start laughing, was getting frustrated.
You didn't know about my income, did you?
Huh? It's probably just a bit more than a part-time job.
No, it's different. My annual income is $500,000. Huh?
John's eyes and mouth were wide open in shock. Emily was also stunned. In fact, over the past 10 years, I had become a popular children's book author, and my income had skyrocketed from essays, interviews, and the like. Moreover, a film adaptation is planned soon, so my income is skyrocketing.
Liar!
Oh, do you want to see this? I said that and showed Emily my bank account screen. It clearly showed a large amount of money being deposited every month, and Emily was at a loss for words when she saw it. Sarah, let's, make up.
Huh? What are you saying?
Emily was furious at John's words, blinded by the money. I watched them blankly and then opened my mouth. Well, if you want to get married, feel free. Oh, and I'll definitely take the compensation for damages.
Sarah, wait, Sarah.
Ignoring John's words, I took Emma's hand. And after saying goodbye to my in-laws, I left their house. John originally worked at my father-in-law's company, but it was revealed that he was lying about going out for sales, and he was fired. My father-in-law planned to forcibly put him on a friend's fishing boat and work him to the bone. Working on a fishing boat was tough for indoor-loving John, and he contacted me several times, but each time I notified my father-in-law, and eventually, the calls stopped. Emily lost custody to George and got divorced. She seemed uninterested in John, who couldn't afford luxuries, and didn't seem to chase after him. She was disowned by her family and lived alone in a rundown apartment. She hadn't worked at all since getting married, and since she had always made others do things for her, she couldn't do anything herself, and there were hardly any places that would hire her as a full-time employee. Still, she had to pay for her living expenses and child support, so she worked multiple part-time jobs and barely made ends meet. After entering a high school, Emma worked hard every day to study abroad and go to a prestigious university overseas. Being originally diligent, her dream is to translate my picture books and deliver them to children all over the world, which makes me happy. As for me, my picture books are selling well, and I am receiving more and more offers for anime adaptations and merchandise. My illness is also progressing well, and although I am still hospitalized, my doctor recently told me that I might be able to leave the hospital next year. And one more thing, George and Emma come to visit me every day. Actually, George recently confessed to me, with remarriage in mind. I haven't given my answer yet, but I can't help but have feelings for him, who said he wants to live together when I leave the hospital. While thinking about what to answer, I work on my picture books every day. Hoping for a happy future for us, I weave stories again today. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears. You always challenge me. You don't need to come back. Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point.
Are you really sure?
She must have been taken aback by my response. Her eyes widened in surprise.
Too bad.
My name is Nancy, and I turned 28 this year. I've been working at the Candu Corporation for 10 years, making me an experienced employee at a young age. While my family wasn't wealthy, my parents took great care of me. Being an only child, I rarely got new things. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs from cousins or neighbors. It was rare to get new outfits. Still, I was quite content. Neighbors and relatives showered me with love, and I have fond memories of going on picnics in local parks with my parents during weekends. Perhaps it was out of sympathy, but I'm still close with my cousins and we keep in touch regularly. Growing up surrounded by love, when I was in 12th grade, I served as the student council president and had excellent grades. My class teacher suggested I pursue further studies. Despite being offered a scholarship to college based on my grades, I declined. I'm not interested in going to college. I want to work as a public servant. My parents tried to persuade me otherwise, but considering the costs of living alone, I went against their wishes and became a public servant. I just wanted to relieve my parents of any burden as soon as possible. But then, my father was diagnosed with a severe illness and passed away before I could repay his kindness. I decided to take care of my mother in place of my father, continuing to live with her. In the hustle and bustle of daily life, time flew as I experienced various facets of working life. By the time 5 years had passed, I'd become a respected figure in the office, leading a comfortable life. I've been given the responsibility of training newcomers and occasionally acting on behalf of my boss. Moreover, the bonuses were good, allowing me to give about $600 monthly to my parents. In my personal life, I enjoyed trips with friends, colleagues, and my boyfriend. One day, our manager was transferred and replaced by a new one. This new female manager was said to be the president's daughter. Rumor had it she had been loafing around, relying on her father's wealth. Unable to stand by and watch, the president decided to put her in a responsible position to teach her some life lessons. Only the president and I knew this. Just because she was the president's daughter, many in the company, who knew she was hired due to her background and had little real-world experience, didn't think highly of her. The work environment started getting tense, and the atmosphere was increasingly stifling. And to think the trouble would eventually come my way. It happened when I made her a cup of hot coffee upon her request.
What's this? Are you trying to annoy me?
I made it just as you told me. She glared at me and threw the hot coffee in my direction.
Ouch! What are you doing?
Unable to avoid it, I held my right arm that got splashed with coffee and glared back at her.
How is this according to my instructions? I said I wanted it warm with extra milk and sugar.
I made it warm with 2 glasses of milk and 2 scoops of sugar.
It's too hot. And it's common sense to take 4 glasses of milk and 3 scoops of sugar.
She again acts as if her own common sense is the world's common sense and imposes her values on others. I'm sorry. I'll make you another one right away.
This is why I don't like high school grads. I heard from my father that you're competent and trusted by everyone.
I have much to learn. It's only because of the support of everyone here that I seem competent. As she continued with her snide remarks, the pain in my burned arm intensified. My mind was occupied with trying very hard to resist the urge to get away from this place and cool my burnt arm as soon as possible. I was looking forward to meeting you after my father spoke so highly of you. But what a disappointment. I wonder how you won him over. Upon hearing her harsh words, a nearby employee tried to step in and help, but I signaled that I was okay, trying not to get noticed by her. Next, that employee would become the target of her. Those who had been targeted by her so far were mentally driven into a corner and forced to resign voluntarily. And this time, it seems that I've become the target of her. As I was pondering how to resolve the situation, she forcibly grabbed my burned arm and squeezed the burned area tightly.
You've got guts to ignore me. Don't think you'll get away with this.
I grimaced in pain. Satisfied with my reaction, she released my arm and ordered me to make coffee again. I excused myself and hurried to the pantry to cool the affected area. It sucks. After work, I immediately visited a dermatologist and got prescribed an ointment, but it never completely healed and left a mark, so I dressed in a way that others couldn't see, to avoid causing concern. From that day on, the harassment from her escalated.
What's this document? Nothing but mistakes. Don't take your job lightly.
What exactly is wrong with the document? While trying to gauge her mood, I asked, and she threw it at me.
There's no way there could be mistakes in this practice document I did. And yet, to be pointed out like this with a red pen, it's unpleasant.
I sighed at the immature behavior of such a grown adult. To be frank, this document clearly needs to be redone due to its inadequacies. You came into this department without understanding anything. I would appreciate it if you could accept the mistakes honestly and acquire knowledge appropriate for a manager. As a trainer, I've been assigning tasks to her, utilizing the experience I had with new employees so far, but nothing seemed to get through to her, a lump of pride.
Don't talk back. You guys should just do everything. I'm the manager, so I don't have to do this kind of stuff.
That's not how it works. Besides, this is what the president personally told us. You're desperate to be liked by my father, huh? Weren't you from a fatherless family? I was a little surprised when she suddenly brought up the topic of my family. Furthermore, I had never talked about this with her before. To be precise, you have only your mother now, right? Despite working so hard in a poor family, your father wasn't rewarded and fell ill. We're at work now. Let's stop discussing irrelevant topics. I just thought of having a little interaction. What a boring woman. Even I couldn't hide my irritation when she made fun of my parents. You're getting angry, huh? That's hilarious. My parents are very wonderful and respectable people. You, who know nothing, have no right to say anything. She quickly responded to the slight drop in my voice tone.
So that's your true nature, huh? Is it okay to have that attitude with the president's daughter? Maybe I should report to my father about your true nature and how I've been treated badly by you. Feel free to do so. Please correct the test document properly and submit it by today. I'm definitely gonna drive you out.
As I turned my back on her, she whispered in a voice only I could hear, but I ignored her and returned to my seat. Afterward, her sarcasm continued, but I managed to get her to learn the basics. It's still a long road ahead. Even though they were basics, it included minor things like detailed computer operations and types of documents. I sat on a bench installed on the office rooftop drinking canned coffee during the break to soothe my exhausted body. While thinking about my future, I suddenly received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. Hello? Is this Nancy? This is Save You Hospital. Your mother was urgently transported here, but she's in a critical condition. Can you come right away? My mind went blank, and I couldn't remember much afterward. I left an early leave notice on her desk first and caught a taxi to the hospital. Upon arriving at the hospital and explaining the situation at the reception, a nurse guided me to where my mother was.
Mom, this can't be true.
There lay my mother, with a beautiful and gentle expression, asleep. According to the doctor, my mother had collapsed at her workplace. By the time she arrived at the hospital, they were in a state of believing in miracles. Indeed, my mother's heart wasn't strong since the past. Yet, the symptoms were stable, and there were no issues during regular checkups, but the mental strain since my father passed away might have affected her, perhaps. For a time, I sobbed, hugging my mother tightly. After coming home with my mother, as the funeral date has been set, I called female manager to ask for my first ever paid leave. I'm sorry for leaving early today and causing trouble. My mother just passed on, so could I take about a week off for the funeral and all the other stuff that comes with it?
Oh, so that's why you left early when I wasn't around? It was an emergency with my mother.
Her cold and harsh tone hit hard, considering how down I was. I won't approve any paid leave for you. I couldn't believe my ears.
In the 10 years I've been here, I've never taken a day of paid leave.
So what? I've contributed so much to this company, so shouldn't I be able to take paid leave to say goodbye to my mother? You always challenge me. You don't need to come back. Having been told this, even I had reached my breaking point.
Are you really sure? I'll take you up on that offer.
She started ranting, but I unilaterally cut the call without a second thought. The funeral went smoothly. I couldn't just sit grieve, and I kept myself busy, handling various tasks and sending out thank you notes to those who'd been so kind. Took my mind off things for a bit. She tried reaching out multiple times, but I ignored every attempt. A bit later, I got a call from the president, so I made my way to the office after 2 weeks. I walked straight to the president's office. On my way, I bumped into 2 coworkers who consoled me. I'm sorry, but I'm going to the president's office first. Their kindness made me feel a bit better. It's Nancy. May I come in? After knocking and asking permission, I was let in promptly.
Hey there, been a while. Heard you've been out of touch for 2 weeks. Doesn't sound like you.
My apologies. You see, I laid out everything, not sugarcoating how she had been treating other employees and myself. Hearing negative stuff about his own daughter must have hurt him, but the president listened to every word. I apologize for my daughter's actions. To be honest, my wife and I spoiled her, and this is the outcome. No worries. I think my parents must have felt the same way as parents. Seeing my awkwardness, the president smiled gently.
Nancy, you're truly a wonderful lady. My daughter's situation was my judgment error. I've spoken to those who've resigned in the past 2 weeks. I can't apologize enough for that.
To the best of my knowledge, this was the first time I'd ever seen the president looking so troubled. Ever since you stopped coming to the department my daughter works in, things have gone haywire. Just the other day, the entire team staged a group protest. Really? I had no idea things had escalated that much. So, what are you going to do about it? The president wore a sad expression for a moment but quickly returned to the person I knew. So I need your help. It's easy for me to have my daughter resign, but that alone won't satisfy all employees. Can you help us? Looking into the president's earnest eyes, I made up my mind. Understood. I'm more than happy to assist. And so, the sanctions against her began.
Hey, how long do you plan on taking time off?
The exasperated female manager finally reached out. Wasn't it you who told me not to come in? It's strange, I'm just following your orders.
Don't give me that. We're in chaos here. Get to the office now.
Reluctantly, I changed into my work clothes and headed to the office. However, there wasn't a single employee present. It was eerily quiet, just like working on a weekend. It's a weekday today, right? Feels weird. It was when I muttered to myself in an empty office. I heard yelling from a woman and the sound of something being thrown from my department. Peeking cautiously inside, I saw her causing a ruckus. What's going on? I called out from behind her. She swiftly turned and grabbed at me.
It's all your fault. Ever since you stopped coming, everyone else followed suit. Now I can't get in touch with anyone. How will you make up for this?
I'm not quite following. Can you please not shift the blame? I calmly told her. She let me go and pushed me away. Such an infuriating woman. Even my father won't help. What's going on? How long has it been since everyone stopped coming?
Half a day. Because of that, I've been handling calls which I've never done, and I have no clue what to do anymore.
The slumped figure of her was pitiful. Her hair was a mess, and the nail polish that she wouldn't remove despite numerous reminders was now chipped. She must have hung her jacket somewhere. There were noticeable frays here and there on her jacket. Seeing her, who had always acted like a queen, now in such a state, I couldn't help but laugh. Serves you right. What did you say? This is on you. What did you think of everyone?
No one's going to follow someone who just waves their power around without any real skills.
As I firmly told her, she approached with her face turning red.
Say that one more time. You really want to be banned from the company?
Well, I'd like to stay if you resign.
Well then, you're fired.
I'll be taking over this company. What a pity for you. Too bad. She was wearing an eerie smile, and for some reason, she had a triumphant look on her face. I answered, all right. It was a short time, but thank you very much. It must have been an unexpected reaction. She had her eyes wide open in surprise. You do realize you're fired, right?
Of course. Now I should pack up my things.
I carefully made my way to my desk, avoiding the papers scattered on the floor. Once there, I started pulling out stuff from the drawers. Wait. Are you really quitting? Yes, why? I asked, tilting my head. Well, shouldn't you at least finish up today's work? Her earlier confidence had disappeared, and she seemed desperate. Do you know that it's illegal to reject a properly justified paid leave request without a valid reason? Huh? It's a violation of labor laws, you know. It's mandated by law. Her face turned ashen. She was clearly in turmoil, but I continued. We're all human. I understand there are compatibility issues. But that doesn't mean you should drive people into a corner. You're unfit to be a manager. Makes me wonder what your folks are like.
Who the hell do you think you are? Insulting my parents like that? You're not getting off easy.
Well, you insulted my parents too, so you're not getting off easy either. She, shaking with rage, tried to put on a brave face.
Our worlds are entirely different. Don't lump me with you.
You're really despicable. I heard you said the same thing and drove those who left into a corner.
That's right. They treated me like I was worthless, so I drove them into a corner as far as I could. Felt so refreshing when they were gone.
I sighed deeply, shifting my gaze to the corridor. Curious, she followed my gaze, muttering, "Father? Why are you here?" There stood the president. As the president stepped into the department, he walked directly to her. "Father, there's been a misunderstanding."
No need for explanations. I've got evidence of your deeds.
No, they just envied me for my skills and set me up. I did nothing wrong. The president lashed out at her, who tried to justify her actions.
You idiot. Because you're so incompetent, I was hoping the competent employees would reform you. Yet under your lead, in the past few months, our performance plummeted and even caused losses to the company.
But you made me a manager, so that means you had faith in me, hadn't you? I promise I'll meet your expectations this time.
No. If I didn't give you a position, you'd have run away.
The president's imposing demeanor made her buckle.
I never even thought of letting you take over the company. This time for sure, I'll transfer you to the countryside to reform you from the ground up. Please, have mercy.
Look who's talking. We'll get constant updates from your new location. And the folks there are pretty reliable, so brace yourself. Turning pale, she lay on her back, crying and laughing hysterically. I chirped, too bad. With a bright and cheerful voice, I said that to her. Later that day, without anyone to see her off, the former female manager left the company. The next day, the employees, enjoying the day off declared by the president, returned to work jubilant. With the departure of the former female manager, peaceful days were restored, and smiles returned to the employees' faces. Meanwhile, the former female manager started from scratch in a rural town where there were no conveniences or entertainment. There, her family's influence didn't matter, and she was strictly schooled by her colleagues every day. As the days passed, she began to change, and finally, she started to speak respectfully and became receptive to feedback from others, as reported by the president. The most surprising thing was receiving an apology call from her. At first, I listened to her, but at the end of the call, she begged, "I've reflected enough. I want you to ask the president to let me return." Of course, my answer was no. I ignored further calls and blocked her number. The president personally contacted those who had resigned due to her and invited them back. As a result, the company's performance quickly recovered, even surpassing its previous state. As for me, I was sitting in the seat of the manager, which became vacant after she left. When the president personally appointed me, everyone in the department was even happier than I was. While the managerial job is tougher than I imagined and I am a bit overwhelmed by my sudden career move, with the support of the employees, I am doing well. Having been both physically and mentally hurt, especially with burns, I have been compensated with settlement money deducted from the former female manager's salary, which has been added to my own pay. Thanks to that, my life has become very comfortable.
Recently, my boyfriend of 2 years proposed to me, and I am over the moon.
We are expecting a child next year, and both of us are excited. Even though I have just entered my second trimester, we are already fully prepared for the birth.
It wasn't necessarily you from the start. What? You think just because we're married, you're loved?
I never imagined my husband would cheat on me and then have the audacity to say such a thing. Overwhelmed with shock, I called my mother, only to receive an unexpected response.
Well, isn't that a good thing?
Huh? At that moment, I had no clue what she thought was good, but it seemed my mother had her own thoughts on the matter. It was time to bring justice to a husband who showed no remorse for cheating and to a sister who stole another's spouse. My name is Sarah Taylor. I'm currently 35 and work as a pharmacist at a general hospital. Since graduating from college, I've been dedicated to my job, living a life far from leisure or romance. My days were simple, devoid of any drama, until one day, when I received a message from a club member I was briefly affiliated with in college. It seems there was a man he wanted to introduce me to. I learned that this man worked in an all-male environment and had zero opportunities to meet women. They asked if they could share my contact information. Initially puzzled, I figured it'd be rude to decline without reason. After agreeing to share my contact information, the man reached out to me immediately. "Hello, I'm David Taylor. Sorry for the sudden approach, but I've heard you're a wonderful lady, so I wanted to chat. I hope you don't mind me sharing your contact info." Our conversations via email and phone were lively, and soon, David and I started dating. My first impression of David was of a man who took charge. He was meticulous in planning our dates and always put ladies first. It felt as if I was being treated like a princess, and my daily life seemed to be colored full of roses. "I promise to make you happy. Please be with me. Let's get married."
"Yes, I'd love to."
So, I got married at 33, but since our wedding, I began to notice David changing. Having lived alone for a long time, David had established his own routines. Of course, I had my own habits from living solo, but as a couple, I tried to make adjustments to ensure we both lived harmoniously. Often hearing David complain about his tiring work, I took it upon myself to handle chores like cooking, cleaning, and laundry. However, this might have backfired. Before I knew it, David seemed to have adopted the mindset that household chores aren't his job.
I was gonna take a bath, but what's this? There's trash in the drain.
I'm sorry, I'm cooking right now and can't step away. Would you mind cleaning it up?
What? Why do I have to clean right after coming home from work?
With a click of his tongue, David began preparing to go out somewhere. Hey, what's up? Dinner will be ready soon.
Why are you ordering me around?
It's really off-putting. Ordering you? I didn't. Besides, where are you going this late?
Anywhere I want. You gonna boss me around?
He slammed the door and seemed to have left. Sometimes I might be lacking in household chores, or if I ask for small favors, he becomes grumpy right away. He acts like a rebellious teenager. He wasn't like this before we got married. With these thoughts, I've been spending more time alone. Lately, I've been holding back from saying unnecessary things to David. I don't say much, don't ask for anything, and keep my reactions neutral. I've been wondering if this is what married life is supposed to be like. Around that time, I've noticed David coming home particularly late. Maybe he's been busy at work, working weekends and unexpected late shifts. I hope he doesn't get sick. You've been coming home late recently. Busy at work?
You trying to boss me around again? That's so annoying.
It's work, okay, work. He responded in an irritated manner, and we stopped talking after that, but I know. One of my acquaintances is a junior coworker of David, and she told me some concerning things. She mentioned David reducing his overtime for family time and that she's seen him arm in arm with someone, disappearing into the night multiple times. I don't remember ever walking arm in arm with David, but something does come to mind. I have a twin sister, and even as adults, people sometimes mistake us. Our faces look identical, but my sister, who's vibrant with makeup and always dresses elegantly, is quite charming. If anyone mistook someone for me, it'd probably be her.
Hey David, my friend said she saw you last Wednesday night around 7 p.m.
Oh?
Really? Around 7 p.m.?
What were you doing then?
I don't remember, maybe I was at the convenience store?
As he said this, not taking his eyes off his phone, I noticed his fingers trembling. I decided to be direct. She said you were walking arm in arm with me. But I was working late that day.
What are you trying to say?
Spit it out. Have you been seeing my sister, Scarlett, behind my back?
So what's your point?
When I confronted David about cheating, he started saying things he never expected. Suddenly, he stood up from the sofa and glared at me.
You know, it wasn't necessarily about you in the first place.
What?
You think just 'cause we're married means you're loved?
What? I mean, when we were dating, didn't we get married because we loved each other? No way.
Someone plain like you don't exactly stand out when you're beside me.
Don't stand out? Huh? So, you think it's okay to cheat with my sister? While fiddling with his smartphone, David replied with a sigh.
Look, I want to become an influencer someday, and looking good on camera matters, right? If I were to choose someone, it'd be Scarlett.
What? Influencer? What are you talking about?
Besides, you're a pharmacist, so even if I mess up, we won't have any financial issues.
The unexpected comments kept coming, and I was having a hard time processing everything. So, are you saying our marriage is just a safety net?
Kinda feels that way, doesn't it?
So, you didn't marry me because you loved me?
Don't flatter yourself too much. Who do you think would fall for a plain Jane like you?
David gave a mocking smile, looking right at me.
I've always thought this, but you don't really make an effort with your makeup or clothes.
You just don't care, do you? Listening to this nonsense, I raised my voice.
Then why don't you divorce me and marry Scarlett? You don't even understand how I feel. I don't care. I'm just with you because I want to achieve my dreams and have a good life. You should be thankful. What? How can you expect me to be grateful in this situation?
David, with a smug look on his face, waved his hand dismissively and then returned his gaze to his smartphone.
If I hadn't confessed to you, you'd probably still be single, right? Just stop making fun of me. I want a divorce right now. No way. I ain't gonna divorce you. Plus, I don't know what our company and your parents would say. And of course, don't tell anyone about this.
I was shaking with anger.
After everything, you have the audacity to tell me not to speak out? Well, I doubt anyone would believe you anyway.
My mind went blank with shock. I was all mixed up and couldn't think straight, but suddenly decided to call my mother, even though it was early in the morning. When I got married, she heard David's greetings and knew him well enough. I thought she would understand me with a brief talking.
What's up calling so early? And are you crying?
No, not really.
Just spill it, what happened?
Prompted by my mother, I explained everything that had happened. After listening to the story about David and Scarlett, she exclaimed loudly.
Well, that's good, isn't it?
Huh? I was puzzled, not understanding what she found good about the situation.
Just lay off for now and leave David be for a bit.
But just leaving him be. You chip away at these situations bit by bit. Taking my mother's advice, I decided to let David stew for a while. A few nights later, I met my mother at a cafe.
Is it okay for you to be out this late? Isn't Scarlett at home?
Scarlett said she's on a date. She mentioned something about a new boyfriend recently, but after hearing about Sarah, it made sense.
So she's been telling you she's going on dates when she heads out?
Yeah, typical Scarlett stuff.
I've felt since high school that she's been a bit loose with her relationships, but I never thought it'd lead to this.
My mother sighed, drinking her iced tea left in the glass at once. We need to keep a close eye on those two. She started fiddling with her smartphone, but after a while, she looked up with a mischievous grin. Next time, bring David over to our place. I've already texted him. She showed me the text message on her phone. It mentioned needing help with shopping and the need for some muscle as she was planning to buy something heavy. Guys like him act all nice in public. Just ask for some help and you'll see his true colors.
I see.
On the agreed day, I headed to my parents' house with David. On the way to my parents' house, it seemed like David suddenly remembered something and started speaking. Hey, I think you know this, but if you tell your parents about that incident, I won't let it slide. Even if you do, they probably won't believe it anyway. You've got to be kidding.
Why on earth would I say that?
What's in it for me? While discussing this, they arrived at my parents' house. David, it's been a while. I'm sorry for bothering you on your day off. It really helps that you came.
No worries, I just wanted to be of assistance to you.
My mother greeted David with a bright smile. Suddenly, as if she remembered something, she made a suggestion. Oh right, Scarlett got the day off from work too. She mentioned wanting to go shopping together. Would that be okay with you, David?
Of course. Well, shall we head to the mall?
The shopping center was about a 30-minute drive from my parents' house. Before we shop, there's a place I'd like to go. Without hesitation, my mother briskly moved through the mall. We ended up at a jewelry shop hosting a special Valentine's Day corner. There was a flyer about a special gift for couples who wrote their wishes for love, and a chance to win a grand prize through a lottery. I often see campaigns giving candies to kids who write their wishes, but I didn't know they have ones for adults too. It says couples and married folks can participate.
Why not give it a shot, Sarah and David? You might get lucky.
Seeing that poster, David began to back away hesitantly. Well, I'm not really into these seasonal promotions.
Valentine's is all about love between couples. It's something couples and spouses should do together.
While emphasizing spouses, my mother chuckled mischievously. I always knew my mother wore her heart on her sleeve, and she was definitely up to something. Realizing this, I decided to play along.
Come on, let's give it a try. There's a lottery where 3 couples can win a luxury resort hotel stay. That resort hotel? You two never really had a proper wedding, so why not take some wedding photos there?
I'm not much for photos, and we might not even win.
We haven't won yet, but we might. Excuse me, ma'am.
Before David could decline again, I called over a store employee and expressed their interest in participating in the Valentine's event. However, the employee's face turned sour upon seeing them. The employee stated that they couldn't participate in the event. Huh? The flyer said couples and spouses can join.
I'm sorry, but we don't allow second-time participants.
Second time? This is our first time ever visiting this mall. Suddenly, I turned around and saw 2 people fidgeting. I couldn't believe it, and when I looked back at my mother, she was asking the store clerk something. What do all participants in this promotion receive as a gift?
It's this charm. It's a special design just for this year.
Saying this, the clerk brought out a shooting star design charm that looked familiar. It was the same charm I had glimpsed on David's bag. I remember spotting it casually when I was observing a pouch I didn't recognize he owned. Could this be the shooting star on David's pouch? Hearing this, my mother immediately sprang into action. That's odd. Scarlett had something similar recently. Excuse me for a sec. As my mother said this, she reached into Scarlett's bag and pulled out a wallet. Just as I thought, it's attached right here. I had a feeling.
Mom, stop it. Don't go through someone's wallet. You're not a thief.
David, who was watching the mother-daughter squabble, seemed even more nervous than before, bouncing his knee.
Look at him jittering. Maybe he's panicking because he's been caught on a date with someone else?
But David snapped back loudly at the front of the store.
What the hell? Just because of one accessory, you're gonna make a big deal out of it? This sucks.
I'm the one who's upset here. My mother smirked mischievously, putting a hand on David's shoulder. Let me get this straight, David. You left your wife, Sarah, to have a date as a couple with her twin sister, Scarlett?
No, you've got it all wrong, my mother-in-law. I just got this charm from someone nearby when we went to the bar. They said it was a charm for a happy marriage. Don't even try to lie like that at this moment. It's obvious.
What I realized later was that these shooting star charms given away at the event had serial numbers engraved on them. The serial numbers matched, and this became the conclusive evidence that gave away to my mother.
We need to have a proper talk. If you have anything to say it at home.
When we got home and all 4 of us gathered in the living room, the atmosphere became tense, like a wake. I didn't even know about such an event. Mom, where did you hear about it? I got a tip from a colleague at work. Apparently, it's become a sort of power spot among those who cheat. They say if you can keep those matching items without getting caught, you're destined to be together. While discussing this, my mother addressed David and Scarlett. So, are you gonna explain in detail?
David, you're married to Sarah but cheating on her.
Besides, you're cheating with Sarah's twin sister, Scarlett. Is that right?
Well, yeah, something like that.
I can't believe he's laughing it up at a time like this.
But they're sisters, so I'm still your precious family, right? I mean, they're from the same family, so why bring up such an unpleasant topic?
You hurt your wife and prayed at that place. Does that mean you're serious about it?
Well, something like that. Scarlett is so feminine and lovely, she knows how to step back and let a man lead.
Suddenly, David became talkative and began to spill the beans on why he cheated.
For me, I was thinking I wanted to be with Scarlett from now on.
Really? My mother just listened quietly to David's outrageous story without uttering a word. I couldn't bear just sitting and listening any longer when suddenly, Scarlett leaned in closer.
We are serious. I mean, Sarah got married first, but he truly loves me. He always tells me that.
If you're that serious, then why not just get a divorce or remarry or whatever you want right now? David, taking my mother's words as a sign of permission, started to get carried away.
So, I appreciate your understanding in the long run, my mother-in-law. And Sarah, I'm gonna remarry Scarlett, so this is it between me and you.
It's not over yet. There are things that need to be settled, right? David seemed taken aback by my mother's words for a moment but quickly resumed his smug grin.
You're saying not to end it, but didn't you just forgive me for divorcing Sarah and being with Scarlett?
But still.
It's true I've borrowed money from Sarah within a certain range. But since I'm still part of the family after the divorce, don't you think returning it would be just silly and crass?
Immediately after hearing David's words, Mother turned to me and asked. That's a valid point, isn't it?
Hold on a second. I can't accept this, divorcing without debt repayment or an apology and then remarrying. I've talked to a lawyer, one of my acquaintances.
I showed them a loan book, which I had prepared just in case, following the advice of a lawyer.
You're gonna pay $40,000 to Sarah? She's earning her own money, isn't that enough? Do you want more? You such a greedy person.
As the two argued loudly, my mother made a proposal. You're starting a new life together, and you don't want to give a huge sum like $40,000 to Sarah, who can earn her own money, right?
That's right. Recovering debt from one's own family is a bad joke.
Divorce is not a happy occasion, but Scarlett getting married is something to celebrate. I'll cover David's debt up to $30,000 for Scarlett.
Mom, you're the best. I'm so happy.
But I have one condition. I want you to think about this. The document my mother presented read waiver of inheritance agreement. Inheritance waiver? So, if Scarlett agrees that, you'll take care of the debt for me, right?
I don't really get it, but this means Mom's gonna help us with our wedding funds, right? Then, we've gotta agree with that.
Facing the unbelievable notion of my mother paying my husband's debt, I felt like crying on the spot. There must be some hidden agenda my mother has. However, instead of helping me, who's been hurt by an affair and subsequent divorce, she's siding with my twin sister and cleaning up the mess. After ensuring that all the necessary procedures had been properly understood, my mother said we could end this matter. When we reconvened after our lawyer told us the application was accepted, my mother muttered as if talking to herself.
Now that Scarlett has renounced inheritance, it'll belong to Sarah, I guess.
Huh? Inheritance? Why bring it up now? Although David seemed utterly confused with countless questions floating in his head, Mother continued her soliloquy.
The commercial building downtown, the apartment in the next town, the convenience store beside it, and this house too. I can't wait to see how much they'll be worth in the future.
Hearing this, David and Scarlett abruptly stood up, causing a loud noise.
This is the first I've heard of this. You tricked us.
If that's the case, I can help manage the properties or something.
What are you blabbering about? You think I'd trust someone who can easily betray others and then act all innocent? Why didn't you tell us? We lived together for so long, and you never mentioned it.
It's from my uncle. He's been a landowner for a long time, but he doesn't have any children. So, there's no one to inherit it. That's why it came to me. What's it to you anyway?
Well, you could at least give us one of the apartments. Like a wedding gift, a love nest.
Save your dreams for bedtime. This is all written in the documents. Neither of you read it, did ya? Maybe you two are a match in some weird way. My mother chuckled and stored the documents in a nearby safe. In the end, the money that my mother paid could be seen as some sort of palimony. You have been a real pain. Always relying on me, saying it's easier to stay at home.
But living alone is scary, and strangers come around.
You bring it upon yourself. You're always getting into some kind of trouble and bringing it home. It's been a real hassle. According to my mother, Scarlett had been reckless with her relationships even before adulthood, causing constant trouble. At that time, I was focused solely on my studies and started living alone when I went to college. So, I wasn't very familiar with how my mother and Scarlett lived. But from what my mother said and how she said it, it was easy to imagine the difficulties.
There was a time when 3 men claiming to have been duped by Scarlett stormed our home. And when she dated a married man, his wife came shouting at our doorstep. It's been hell. Isn't that the same as an affair? Just like what she's doing now. I thought she had finally settled down, and then I hear about an affair with Sarah's husband.
After my divorce was finalized, David and Scarlett filed their marriage papers and became a couple. But what really kept them going was the thrill of their secret relationship. Ever since David divorced me and started living together with Scarlett, aspects of each other that they didn't want to see or know about began to emerge. Every time it appeared to be, the relationship between them were getting more sour. Furthermore, it became widely known at David's workplace that he had divorced due to an affair. He's been treated like a hot potato because rumors say he made a move on his wife's sister. A mutual friend who works at the same office as David told me that he's gonna be transferred to a sales office in Nebraska soon. Well, he's essentially been demoted, hasn't he? But you know how he is, he might not even realize why he's been demoted. True. That's quite possible. One day, I was having tea at a cafe with my mother while I was taking a half-day off to use up some paid leave. It's a local favorite and a nice spot to chat, but I didn't expect to run into the last person I wanted to see there.
Sarah, I'm gonna be transferred. Oh, really? But you brought this on yourself, right? It's a sales office that's a half-day away by train. Isn't our manager harsh? They won't even cover my moving expenses. Well, that figures. Why the heck not? It's a company order, they should at least cover the moving costs. I've been working hard for the company.
He seemed totally oblivious to the fact that he was being demoted because of his own actions. What's more, the nerve of him trying to squeeze relocation costs from the company.
Hey, can you lend me some money for the moving expenses? Or I can take it as a promotion bonus or something. You talk without realizing the absurdity of what you're saying. Besides, I don't need you anymore. Please get out of my sight.
Ever since I divorced David, my days have been like a breath of fresh air. Recently, I thought about trying something new. A comic I casually posted on social media turned out to be a huge hit. I never thought a comic about my sister taking away my husband, mixed with some fiction, would be read by so many people. I feel blessed to be able to take on new challenges, encouraged by warm messages from fans. Maybe by sharing it in the form of a comic and having it read by many, some of my unpleasant memories are being processed. I hope to continue living fulfilling days, both in my work and with my comics.